Hey, this is Ben. This is the 45th stanza in The Art of Peace. First thing I'm going to do is bring my awareness into presence. And number one thing that's really a part of my awareness is the cold. It's windy and cold, and the pieces that make that up start at my skin, the feeling of the breeze on the left side of my face. I can feel a sense of escaping, like when a carbonated beverage is opened for the first time. The release of all these bubbles from deep inside the beverage kind of come up and escape through the top, and that's kind of what it feels like in my body, especially on my left side. There's like these tiny, but if that was all happening at once, in mass, left side of my body, I can't even describe it. It's more like it's more like that, but it's with all. Anyway, I can't do it. Made me think of a didgeridoo. You know what a didgeridoo is? It's a Australian form of sound music. It's not like any music I've ever heard, but it. Back to the practice. Ground. A ground I run into, sensation I run into every time I sit crisscross applesauce is a pull on the outside of my ankles and a pressure on my ankles. It's a spread out pull. It's broad. It's pretty thin. It's got a grayness to it. It's just got a rugged. There's just a. It's constant. Feel it on the left, feel it on the right. Pelvis is slightly tucked in the pelvis, and part of that is just kind of where my pelvis thigh connection, that the entire connection between pelvis thigh, there's just a tightness, I guess. There's a consistency with this kind of tucking of the tailbone. It's the familiar spot. It's the default. It's my body's natural inclination without awareness is to fall into this alignment. And so from here, I typically start to shift around and try to get my tailbone reaching back a little bit, leaning forward, reaching back with my tailbone. And what that does for me is it opens up the core in the front. And as I get into the core in the front, I can see, or I can feel where my front is either collapsed or taut. And that aligns me into my lower back and my sides. I come into my heart space, move the shoulder blades, and just notice how if you move your shoulder blades and twist your upper torso, you can feel how your upper torso is turning while your ground is still. And then stop your upper torso, but just move your shoulder blades, and you can feel how your torso is now still, your core is still, your hips are still, but your shoulder blades are moving. And then you can stop that and just kind of check that out. You know, the visualization I'm having is the dome of a cathedral Also, there's a Stephen King book called The Dome. It's a fascinating idea. And then take a full breath. Now, I can share my awareness of my full breath with you by explaining how my full breath feels using words that are qualitative. So as I take my breath in, notice at the bottom of my ribs movement to the sides and out. As I feel that, I feel an upness underneath my arms and underneath my collarbones. If I open my awareness three-dimensionally, or open to three-dimensional awareness, and expanding, growing, you can feel that all the way up. Take a full breath in or hold it at the top. Feel how there's a limit. You can't go any farther. If this happens to me and this happens to you, so I can share my awareness of it with you to help you bring your awareness to it. Feel the top. Breathe in from the nose. You can breathe in from the mouth. But you notice how there's a point where you just can't do it anymore. That's a termination point. They exist. Now, the longer you hold that edge, the more it takes to hold the edge. The longer you hold the edge, the more it takes to hold the edge. And so the practice, the fullness of the practice, is going into an edge confidently, not being overwhelmed as sensation changes. Oh, let's make holding the edge for as long as makes sense for your training at that time. Oh boy. Stay present with everything. It's good. And then eventually you exhale. The challenge that I face every time I go into a deep edge is that there's a lot going on. There's a demanding. The moment is demanding. You are deciding in the moment. Really, really, really sensational. Really, really, really full. Really, 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 really in. Oh, it's there right now. Nothing else matters. That is it right there. That is the number one, the biggest piece of the puzzle, the part that makes the most sense because it's right now, breathing out right then, right there. No more waiting, no more practice. That's it. That is the end. That is boom. My life is not like that typically. A lot of the decisions I make, the interactions with my life don't have that immediacy in a sense. It seems much less significant. Decisions have to be made regarding things that take time to develop. There's a kind of an evolutionary change that's slowly taking place. And certain decisions don't have immediate ramifications or immediately aware. I'm not as immediately aware of ramifications. Now, underneath what I'm saying is a part of my brain going, yes they do, yes they do, yes they do, yes they do, yes they do. Every moment has that same immediacy. So it's like this weird conversation in my head. There's this clear recognition that certain moments are more twinged with fuller sensation than other moments. And I guess what I'm experiencing is the mindset that one's not better than the other. One has qualities that are different than the other. The qualities, the studying of the qualities, it's like, okay, so the qualities of immediacy, sensationally, are And then the qualities of, well, just both sound qualities of the first: short, choppy, quick, fast, immediate. Second, long, drawn out, slow, variation, steady. So immediately I think back to my first experience during the practice, which was the sensation of being really cold, and how the sensation of cold had both at the same time. So it was the first time I ever really looked at cold like this. Every moment's unique. So looking at cold and seeing both sensations take place at the same time, the immediacy and the steady. I'm shivering now, and I can feel the sensation of immediacy and steady. And forgive me for using the word immediacy. It just seems like there's a happening right now and happening right now. Like the shivering is happening right now. You're cold. You're cold. And then the bass that's kind of causing the shivering, just cold itself, is cold. It's constant. Oh, language, man. Tell you, this has been causing me a lot of consternation recently. This language, and am I using language correctly? And I was talking with another expert in the mindfulness field, and she used language that had some unique connotations to it, and it was really great to work with someone else who's, cutting edge mindfulness performance. And so it was a different expression of the practice, and so it made me wonder about my language. And there's always, my ego is always present with, what you're trying to do is share language and win hearts and minds and influence and share, and what's the best way to do that? And the part of the best way to do that is to be authentic. But if I'm even listening to the experience of what's the best way to do that, I'm participating in my egoic expression of myself, myself as self. And I wonder if the act of articulating that, even though it's a part of authenticity, or I'm using the facilitation of self to foster my experience of presence. Form and formless, form and formless. There's a lot of wisdom that suggests that the ego is something to overcome. Come back to source. And the the logical conclusion of coming back to source, if you have to come back to something, that means that you were away from it. It's kind of like being reminded of what source is, and in order to really experience that, you've got to go into what it's not. But there's no disconnect there's no disconnect between source and self. Source and self. It's just self has the capacity to recognize other than source, or is the question expression of source. And then the analysis includes, well, the experience beyond source, source being infinity, beyond source being not source, so not infinity or finite, temporal, constant and change, change and constant, understanding constant from the perspective of change, all forms of change. Change is self, source is constant. Change is self, source is constant. Inside of self is suffering. Inside of source is not suffering, but includes suffering. Self gives source the opportunity to suffer. Source suffers to recognize itself. I'll leave it at that. Go work out. Shit. All right, the 45th stanza. From ancient times, deep learning and valor have been the two pillars of the path. Through the virtue of training, enlighten both body and soul. King, out.